Frightful's Mountain, Chapter 9 continued, page 106, from Frightful Finds Sam. The lengthening hours of daylight worked their spring magic on the birds. Their reproductive organs responded to the light, and they began to build nests. For her part, Frightful slept on her scrape, her breast against the iron plate. Despite blasts of cold winds, rain, and snow, Frightful felt the peregrine falcon spring. She awoke at dawn to hear Lady calling and glanced up. Lady was headed home to the cliff above the Schoharie River where she had been raised. She had survived the winter in the traditional peregrine way by migrating to South America. She had lived on ducks and shoreboards, and she had ingested DDT, banned by the U.S. Congress because it killed millions of birds, fish, and amphibians after World War II. The insecticide called DDT was still being used in South America. Lady got her share of the poison when she ate the birds who had eaten the DDT-killed insects in Chile. Each winter, she would accumulate more of the poison in her body tissues. The shells of her eggs would be thin and eventually smash when she tried to incubate them. She would not live to be 10 or 25 years old, as some peregrine falcons do. She would tremble and die after a few winters in South America. Frightful watched Lady until she was out of sight. She did not see her come down on a sycamore tree near the Margaretville Bridge. Men in orange coveralls were working there. Standing on platforms, they were painting the webs and cords sage green. A cement mixer churned. This was no place for nervous Lady. She took off for the Schoharie River. Near her birthplace, she flew into Chup. Recognizing her, he chased her away. Offspring do not come home. Lady sped east. When she had put 40 miles between herself and her first home, she was over the upper Hudson River. Swinging back and forth across the great waterway, she searched for a cliff like the one she had been raised on. No sooner was Lady out of sight than Frightful forgot her. She flew up and down the river, looping and spiraling. Finally she turned and flew to Sam's mountain. She alighted on her perch. Sam was building a fire to cook his breakfast of wild cereal grains he had collected. "Cree, cree, cree, careet." He straightened up, saw Frightful, and his eyes twinkled. "Good morning, beautiful bird," he said, taking her measure. "Guess we won't hunt today. You're fat and full of rat." "Cree," she called softly. After eating his porridge, Sam got a bowl he had chipped out of some stone and filled it with chunks of pine resin. He put it in his stone oven and threw on more wood. The resin melted. He dipped a stick into the goo and worked it into a crack in the plumping mill box. When it cooled, he poured water in it. The box no longer leaked. Frightful looked out at nothing as she listened to old familiar sounds on the mountain. Behind her, the downy woodpecker drilled a dead tree with a special beat she recognized. He had been a resident of the hemlock grove ever since she had lived there. A flock of ruby-crowned kinglets alighted in the top of the big hemlock. They called to each other a twittering farewell, as they did every year at this time. Sam's Mountain was their last rendezvous on their trip north. From this forest, they would fly off by twos to their ancestral breeding grounds. "The kinglets are here," Sam said to Frightful. "It's bird springtime in the Catskills, snow and all." He looked up the walnut-sized birds flitting among the tree limbs. "Time to build a nest, Frightful," he called. Frightful stretched one beautifully gray-spangled blue wing, then the other. Bending her knees, she pushed off and wove awkwardly upward through the trees. She was no forest goshawk. Clear of the last twigs, she trilled a soft tribute to wings in flight and dove freestyle down the mountain to the river. She was leveling off to land on a bridge when a male peregrine joined her. They landed simultaneously on the top of the arch of the bowstring truss. "Cheep, cheep, cheep," he called. Frightful jumped down to the large horizontal web and walked to her scrape. He followed for a few steps, then stopped. Frightful was a third larger than he. He bowed to show his respect. An aluminum Fish and Wildlife Service band ringed his leg. He had been raised in captivity and released to the wild by Heinz Meng. The number 426 was visible on his band. Frightful looked at him. She did not attack. He held a tasty bite of food in his beak and presented it to her. She accepted it. He bowed again, then shook out his feathers, which were ruffled and bent from travel. 426 had spent the winter in Ecuador and was now looking for a roost like the one he had known in the breeding barn of the falconer. Coming over Sam's mountain, he had seen Frightful and followed her to her eyrie. The coming of spring was affecting Frightful. She glanced at 426, leaned down, and scraped the iron plate. 426 came closer. She lifted her feathers to him. He hurtled himself into the air, bulleted down the river valley, made a two-circle loop, climbed, and sped back to the bridge. Frightful watched his spectacular sky dance twice more. Then she flew off the bridge and traced the same design in the air. She climbed, looped, and finally, in a graceful maneuver, held on to his feet as he flew upside down beneath her. For 3 days, Frightful and 426 danced above the river and mountains. They flew so high they could see the Hudson River. They flew so low they scared the nesting redwings. Upside down, they called to each other. Then Frightful led 426 to the one mountain. "Cree, cree, cree, Kareet," she called, and landed in the hemlock. 426 came down beside her. Sam whistled their hunting tune. Frightful left 426 and flew to the mountain meadow. There she waited on, watching Sam run through the laurel and seedling hemlocks to their field. Just as he arrived, 426 swooped under her, took her feet in his, and swung her in an arc up into the sky. High above Sam, they opened their wings and flew in tandem down the mountain, over the river, up into the clouds, and back to Sam. Laughing, crying, Sam watched them disappear again. "Frightful, you've got a mate," he exclaimed, and climbed the nearest tree as swiftly as a marten. Near the top he saw Frightful and 426 drop out of sight in the river valley. Suddenly they reappeared again and, looping side by side, flew straight toward Delhi. Sam noted their direction. He lined up the top tree on a mountain with the weather-vane rooster on the peak of a distant barn and scrambled down. He ran full speed downhill for the west branch of the Delaware, looking at rocks and trees for white streaks of bird excrement that marked a peregrine falcon eyrie. He saw no such marks, absolutely none, then remembered that Leon Longbridge had told him no peregrine falcon would nest near Delhi, no cliffs. The bridge was high, and he recalled that peregrines had learned to nest on bridges. Running hard, he took his Peaks Brook trail to town. When Sam reached the bridge, Frightful was playing with 426, sliding and gliding on the winds at 1,500 feet. Finding no telltale marks of an eyrie on the bridge, Sam walked up Elm Street and stopped in the library to get a book on farming wild edible plants. He was returning when Frightful and 426 came back to the bridge. She saw Sam. He did not see her, and she did not call his name. It was evening, 18 miles and 16 minutes away as the Falcons fly. The repair work on the Margaretville Bridge was nearing completion. Supplies were loaded into trucks and flatbeds, and orders were called in for air compressors and movable work platforms. The Bowstring Bridge at Delhi is next, Joe Cassini said on a cellular phone to his boss at the Department of Transportation in Albany. The following dawn, the sky was pink and orange with May's morning light. Frightful and 426 made it. 50 hours later, she retired to the scrape. Sitting down, the wind from the river brushing her face, she laid a pale cream and pink egg. It was mottled with rich red and brown splotches. Thousands of tiny pores in the shell allowed oxygen to enter and water and carbon dioxide to escape. A thin cuticle glistened on its surface. This would prevent bacteria from getting through the shell. The egg was a masterpiece. Frightful did not incubate it. She and 426 perched nearby, looking at it and feeling new interest in the bridge in the river valley. Then they took off together, a synchronized pair, looping and diving in the sky.